and now for something completely different. Dr. David Bernstein, who many of you know, is not only the nicest human being on the planet, which he is, but he is also a wonderful dentist, and I can attest to that personally. He's also an amazing sofer stam, which is what he's going to talk to us about today. I've had the zechut of having him write my grandchildren's tefillin, and that is something which is very, very precious to me. And just to complete the picture, he's also an amazing Baal Tefillah. And those of you who've joined us, Yomim Noraim, and listened to his Ne'ilah last year and the year before will know exactly what I'm talking about. So tonight, Dr. Bernstein is going to tell us about some secrets in the Megillah from the point of view of being a Sofer Stam. So, David, if I can pass over to you, please let me know when you want me to share the screen. David is going to show us some pictures, and I'm going to try and share the screen at his request. David.
Wow, Johnny, thank you. What can I say? Thank you very, very, very much for organizing this incredible event, not only tonight, but before every Chag. I think, in addition to the content of the speakers, the beautiful words, just the concept, the fact that you always put together rabbis of different communities. I'm not quite sure, the unity, I'm not sure why I was asked to speak, but nevertheless, when Johnny asks, it's very hard for me to say no. So with that, I'll say hi, everyone. I'll reiterate what the two rabbis have already said. Boy, are we living through awesome, miraculous times. And I didn't write this down, but I'm in the mamad now, and with me is my wife and my dear mother-in-law. And I'll just tell you that yesterday, after a number of sirens when we were locked up in the mamad, I think she said it just mesiach lefi tumo, just without thinking about it. She said, with what did I merit to experience and live through these awesome times and through these miracles? And honestly, I know why she merited it, but and may she continue ad mea ve'esrim, many years of health and happiness. But nevertheless, it caused me to think about this evening's subject. And let me put it this way: we're living through awesome times. Mordechai and Esther lived through miraculous times. They recorded it in Megillat Esther. So let me ask you, if you were living during their times and you were charged with the responsibility of recording the miracles of that time, would you have written Megillat Esther any differently? And to bring it home, if you were the one chosen to write Megillat Adar 2026, March, today, our times, what would you write? Let me explain and begin by reading to you from Rav Melamed's Pneinei Halacha. Megillat Esther, he says, נחשבת כאחד מספרי הקודש, ולכן צריך לכתוב אותה כדרך שכותבים ספר תורה. I'll say it in English. Megillat Esther is considered part of the holy writings, canonized as part of the Tanakh. Therefore, it must be written in the exact way that a Torah scroll is written. Black ink on parchment. If it's written using anything other than ink or parchment, it is not valid. And one who reads from it has not fulfilled his obligation and said his bracha levatala. The cloth, the hide from which the parchment is made, must be tanned l'shem Megillat Esther, for the sake of Megillat Esther. The individual sheets of parchment must be sewn together with threads made of gidim, of sinews. And one must etch the lines, it's called sirtut, using a stylus before commencing to write on the parchment so that the words come out straight. And furthermore, it must be written by hand, and the scribe must be mindful of the sanctity of the Megillah. Johnny, if you can please put on slide 15. Okay. And I'll ask you in the meantime. There it is. Okay, we'll see. Why? Why did the halacha mandate and insist on such precision? Here you see, Lefnei Aktiva, the Sofer has to say this, has to certainly think it, L'Shem Kedushat Megillat Esther, and Hashem, please save me from any type of mistakes, and has to have this L'Shem Megillat Esther. So why did the halacha mandate such precision? I believe it is because Esther HaMalka and Mordechai, Vatichtov Esther, Vayichtov Mordechai, they insisted that this story, though it does not have Hashem's name, and perhaps because it does not have Hashem's name in it, it must not only be documented, but it must be done so in a very specific way. No doubt, as we've all said, we're living through very special times. Whether you're now sitting in a mamad listening to the sirens and alarms, and certainly if you're a soldier in one of those miraculous Air Force machines overlooking and flying over Tehran, or if you're a Jew in Chutz La'aretz saying Tehillim, we're all together living through extraordinary, miraculous times. I would like to humbly suggest that Esther Malka is asking and perhaps demanding of each and every one of us to not just live through this, but to pause, to reflect, and to document these extraordinary events for yourself and for posterity in a very careful and thought-out way. And so I ask you again, if you were the one chosen, given the privilege, the responsibility to write Megillat 2026, the Roaring Lion perhaps, our times, what would you write? And I'm very humble to ask this question in the presence of rabbis who are professional authors, professional columnists, podcasters, but nevertheless, I was asked, so I will. Let's begin by looking at a few psukim in Megillat Esther, which might help us properly write this document, Megillat 2026. The Megillah tells us in chapter 9, verse 6, if you happen to have a Megillah near you, the Megillah lists the sons of Haman, Parshandata, Dalphon, Aspata, the 10 sons of Haman, the Ben Hamdata, the adversary of the Jews, Haragu, they slew. Aseret bnei Haman Haragu. Very clear. The Megillah tells us that Haman's sons were killed. And then, in Pasuk 12, Achashverosh repeats this to Esther, and he says, in Shushan, Esther, the Jews slew 500 men and 10 sons of Haman. What is your request, Esther? What else can I do for you, dear? Ad chatzi hamalchut. And Esther replies, and this is the Pasuk I really want to focus on, Pasuk 12, and I'll say it in English, if it pleases the king, let it be granted also machal, tomorrow, and let the 10 sons of Haman be hanged on the gallows. The episode concludes with Pasuk 13, and they hanged the 10 sons of Haman. So let me ask you, what is happening here? There are many, many questions, but I'd like to focus on 2 of them. The first question, Esther's request is very surprising, because just a few psukim ago, the 10 sons of Haman are listed by name, and the pasuk tells us clearly, Haragu, they were killed. So why does Esther ask, if it please the king tomorrow, let the 10 sons of Haman be hanged on the gallows? Weren't they killed already? Were they hanged twice? The second question is, why does Esther insist on saying, Vegam machar, tomorrow? Why not simply say, let justice be done? What is the significance of that extra day? So the pshat, the classical explanation of machar, is given to us by our very familiar Mefarshim, Rashi and Ibn Ezra, who simply explained that the sons were killed on the 13th of Adar during the battle. likely by the sword. In Persian practice, hanging often meant displaying the corpse publicly. And this is what Esther requested. They were killed on the 13th, but Esther requested they be displayed publicly on the 14th. The purpose? Deterrence, public demonstration. When Esther said machar, she wanted to designate a special day dedicated to deterring the enemies of the Jews in Shushan and elsewhere, and to tell them that their rebellion is over. But another way of reading the Megillah is not through Pshat, but through the eyes of the Midrash. Many of you might be familiar with the fact that though Hashem's name does not appear in the Megillah explicitly, whenever it says Hamelech, it refers to the Melech, the King of Kings, Hashem, the King of the world. And so in that pasuk, Esther, knowing full well that Amalek, as the Torah tells us, is not a problem that goes away so quickly, it is midor ledor for generations. And so she's pleading with Hashem to hang future machar Amaleks wherever and whenever they may rear their ugly heads. And so, let me ask you, could it be that machar is actually nevuah? It's Esther's prophecy about an event that took place no less than 24 centuries later, after Esther. After all, the rabbis tell us that Esther is listed among the Eser Neviot. She was a prophetess. And the Megillah itself tells us Chazal was written with divine inspiration, with Ruach HaKodesh. And so, if Johnny is able, I'll ask you please to display slide 55 as I start describing that after World War II, the top leading Nazi criminals were tried. You might be familiar with the Nuremberg trials that were held in the years 1945 to 1946. Yeah, Johnny, if you can put on slide 55. Oh, you did, thank you. You might, at the end of the trials, 10 of the top Nazi leaders were sentenced to death. They were executed by hanging. And very interestingly, one of them, Julius Streicher, Imach Shemo V'Shem Zichro, as he was led to the gallows right before he was executed, he shouted the words, Purim Fest 1946. This declaration from the mouth of this Rasha, Purim Fest 1946, is very significant and meaningful. You see, the Nazis were very obsessed with Purim. It was Streicher himself who on November 10th, 1938, the very day after Kristallnacht, gave a famous speech in front of 100,000 Germans in this same city, Nuremberg, Germany. And in this speech, he justified the violence against the Jews with the claim, quoting from our own Megillat Esther, that the Jews had murdered 75,000 Persians, innocent Persians, you might add, in one night. And that we, the Germans, he said, would have the same fate if the Jews were allowed to accomplish their plan to institute a new Purim in Germany. So you see, apparently even Streicher himself, Yimach Shemo, could not help but notice the parallels of the hanging of the 10 Nazis and the hanging of Aman's 10 sons. He sensed that he was part of that machar of our story. Now, here's where the story becomes even more fascinating. What is the year 1946 in the Jewish calendar? I'll give you a clue. In Megillat Esther, and Johnny, I'll ask you please for slide 46, in the list of the 10 sons of Haman, 3 letters are written much smaller font than the others. Take a moment, please, and look at that slide. Can you see those letters? So Johnny, please turn to slide 47. Those 3 letters, as you can see there in the name Parshandata, the small taf, Parmashta, the small shin, and Vaizata, the small Zayin, they're all highlighted in yellow. Those three letters, Taf Shin Zayin, correspond to the very year 1946. But what about the millennium, I might ask? In which millennium will this Machar take place? And so, in slide 45, please, Johnny, it is very interesting that this goes back as early as the Gemara, that the Vav in the name Vaizata is written larger. There are various explanations to that, but chronologically, it can represent Vav, the Gematria 6, right? The sixth millennium, making it the exact year 5707, Hey Tafshin Zayin, 1946. And incidentally, visually, the large Vav with the hook on top is meant to look like the gallows upon which the 10 evildoers were hung. But it gets even much more exciting than just the 10 hangings of Amalek and the 3 small letters in the large Vav. And I thank my friend, Rabbi Stuart Wise, who we all had the privilege of hearing, and my friend David Wolf for some of this info. First, the hanging. Usually, capital punishment was done by a firing squad, especially for war criminals. But strangely enough, these despicable evil Nazis demanded the usual death sentence by firing squad, but the judges insisted that they be executed by hanging, not the usual thing. This shows the divine plan, as otherwise, why would Esther also insist that the already dead sons of Haman be hanged? Second, as a matter of fact, the actual death sentence was sealed a few months earlier in June of 1946. And if indeed they were executed on June 1946, this prophecy of Esther would have been 1 year off. And thus, the fact that they pleaded and did whatever they could to post October 1st, 1940 began, making it exactly Shin Zayin.
David,
Third, Hoshana Rabbah,
David,
a day very angels.
David,
Yes?
we lost you for a couple of minutes then. Can you just go back to, you froze for a minute or two. Can you just go back
Yeah.
and start from if they'd been hanged in June 1946?
Oh, thank you,
We
sure,
lost you
John.
there.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so Sakan, as a matter of fact, the actual death was sealed in June 1946. And if they were hung in June, this would have been 1 year off the exact prediction or prophecy of Esther Amalka. And so they pleaded and they tried to ask for amnesty and things like that. And so their sentence was postponed until October of that year, past Rosh Hashanah. And that made it the exact year, Tafshin Zayin, exactly as is predicted or prophesied by Esther. Third, October 1st, 1946, is Hoshana Rabbah, a day very fitting, as according to Midrash Tehillim, is the day that the Malachim, the angels, declare the Jews victorious. And fourth, the number 10. 10 were hanged, but in actuality, there was an 11th, Hermann Göring, Imach Shemo. But he, the night before the hanging, he committed suicide. Well, Haman too had not 10 but 11 children. But his daughter, the Gemara tells us, was the 11th, committed suicide, exactly paralleling what happened with Hermann Göring. Whether it was a man or a woman, I will leave for this talk, but Rabbi Wise enlightened me about that. Well, what an echo of the Megillah. But I now want to go, and I would like to offer my own little take on Machar. And so I would like to suggest that not only the small letters and the large vav, but also the word machar is a code word in the Megillah. Using that word, Esther is sending us to a pasuk in Sefer Shmot, chapter 13, pasuk Yudaled. A pasuk we might all be familiar with, Vayaki shalcha bincha machar le'emor mazot. And when your child asks you tomorrow, what is your worship of Hashem all about? What is Yetziat Mitzrayim? What is your religion all about? You might be familiar that Esther is sending us to the four sons sitting at the second table, at the Seder table. And Rashi tells us the monumental words for Mechilta on this word machar. Yesh machar shehu achshav, says Rashi. V'yesh machar shehu la'achar zman. There are two types of machar. There's an immediate machar, indeed tomorrow. Today is Sunday, tomorrow is Monday. But there's another machar, the long future, la'achar zman. In the long run, what are you going to tell your children? What are you going to answer your children when they ask you? What will you tell them about 2026, about these very times that we're living through? What were you doing? In other words, if you had to distill Esther's message to your future generations in just one sentence, what would that be? Well, I was very fortunate to hear the answer from no one but Esther herself. Yeah, I'm serious. Esther herself. You see? All right. Just 2 days ago, this past Friday night, as we were walking home from shul, our very own, our wonderful friend Esty Brick kept saying repeatedly, we're living through very, very awesome and special times, and there's a call of the hour. She must have said it at least 5 times. Lech kenos et kol hayehudim. Go gather, go assemble, go unite all the Jews. The Jews, we have to focus on unity, on appreciating each other, and on being united, because something big is about to happen, she said. And so we all woke up in the morning of Shabbat morning to the great miracles we're all experiencing. And so the Megillah has to be read from parchment, just like a Sefer Torah, because the Megillah is not simply about Persia, it's about our destiny. It's about the divine plan that unfolds quietly, sometimes invisibly, and sometimes decades or centuries later. It's about the promise that no matter how powerful Amalek appears, the machar, the tomorrow, belongs to us. How do we know it with certainty? What's the guarantee? Vatichtov Esther. Esther insisted on writing it down for all of us. Vatichtov Esther has a large taf, with a capital taf, she wrote it. Lech knos et kol hayehudim. Which means exactly what Rabbi Johnny is doing for all of us tonight, uniting not all of us, but the different congregations, the different shuls. It means, Lech Knos, go call up 75,000 young boys and girls to go and fight Amalek. Milchama la Hashem ba'Amalek midor dor. But it also means, Kitvuni ledorot, write me for generations, said Esther, for your children, for Dorot. Go assemble all the Jews, whether they wear a kippah like yours or no kippah at all. Ki shalcha bincha machar le'emor, because tomorrow your children and dear ones are watching, and they will machar la'achar zman. After all this excitement is over, Emir Hashem, all our soldiers will return home safely and victoriously, and we will no longer be jumping in and out of our mamads and our shelters. Your children, machar, they will remember and emulate one and only one thing. Did my parents, did my family heed Esther's call? Lech kenos et kol hayehudim. Go assemble and connect with all the Jews. And they'll ask, what have you, a role model, done for your fellow Jew during these wondrous times we're living in? And so I challenge you, as I did right at the beginning of our talk. If you were the one chosen, given the privilege, the responsibility to write Megillat March 2026, Roaring Lion, what would you write? May we soon all dance and sing together the famous words from the Megillah, La Yehudim Haita Ora v'simcha v'sason v'yikar. Thank you very much. Happy Purim.
Thank you so much, David, for those inspiring words. Amazing. And at very short notice, too. Thank you so much. Just
Thank
very
you.
inspiring. It reminds me
And
of a little sign that there used to be in my aunt and uncle's home. Those of you who know Jeffrey Glasky, his parents, who were my aunt and uncle, lived next door to me. And they had this little sign which I could never, ever understand. It took me a long, long time till I was quite much older before I understood it. And the sign, which would today be on a fridge magnet, but they didn't have them in those days. It was just a little thing on a piece of wood that said, "Today is the tomorrow that you worried about yesterday." And I was thinking about that sign as you were speaking, David, because today is the tomorrow that the Megillah was speaking about yesterday, all those years ago. Today is our tomorrow. It is our machar, as you so beautifully spoke. So thank you so much for that. And again, this will be available on recording for everybody to re-listen to at a later date. I'm going to stop the recording now for the moment.
one quick question.